What science could not answer, Islam did. My name is Emily Carter. I am 38 years old. I am a biologist, a genetics researcher, and for most of my adult life, I believed that the universe was nothing more than a system of chemicals and chance. I used to say that faith was a tool people used to comfort themselves. I never imagined that one day I would sit in front of a camera and tell you that I found mine. Look, I grew up in a very typical American household. We were not religious, not in the active sense. My parents believed in goodness, in kindness, in hard work, but God was more of an optional background character in our home, someone you acknowledged in passing but never truly spoke to. I was that kid who lived in the library, the one who stayed behind after school because she wasn't finished turning the pages yet. Microscopes made more sense to me than dolls ever did. I loved pressing my eye to the lens, watching entire worlds appear as if they had been waiting for me. There was something comforting about discovering a new fact, a new pattern, a new explanation that made the world feel a little less mysterious. In high school, genetics became my universe. The thought that inside every cell, billions of instructions were perfectly folded and waiting to be read felt magical without requiring magic. That was my certainty. The elegance of DNA, the calm predictability of lab work, the way nature followed rules even when people didn't. I thought that worldview was airtight. When my classmates talked about faith, I couldn't relate. I didn't judge them. I just felt like belief belonged to another language entirely, one I wasn't fluent in and wasn't sure I ever needed to learn. But when I turned 30, things shifted. You know how sometimes life shakes you awake even when you thought you were fully conscious? That happened to me in a way I didn't see coming. It started quietly, with this slow, creeping burnout. Long nights in the lab that bled into early mornings. Experiments that had once excited me now collapsed in ways that felt personal. There was this constant hum inside my chest, a kind of emotional static that made everything feel louder, heavier, harder to carry. I used to find peace in data, in clarity, in the clean certainty of numbers. But suddenly the spreadsheets, the sequences, the controlled environments, they all felt strangely hollow. Like the comfort they once gave me had expired without warning. Loneliness slipped in, not dramatically, just inch by inch. I had spent years chasing professional milestones like they were stepping stones to some promised meaning. Grants, publications, presentations, more lines on a resume. I kept thinking that fulfillment would be waiting at the end of each achievement, like a prize you eventually earn if you work hard enough. But every time I reached one, there was nothing behind it. No anchor, no center. Just more motion. No destination. And in the quiet moments, a question I had been avoiding for years finally surfaced. Why is anything here at all? A question no microscope, no dataset, no peer-reviewed article could help me escape. This is where everything changed for me. One night, I was analyzing a gene expression dataset. Just routine work. But something about that night felt different. I zoomed into this section of DNA that controlled a developmental pathway. I remember staring at the screen thinking, this is too precise, too intentional, too impossibly balanced. For years, I told myself biology was just the result of evolution refining randomness. But suddenly, the idea of pure randomness felt fragile, almost childish. Like trying to explain a symphony by saying someone bumped into a piano the right number of times. I went home that night unusually unsettled. And I did something strange. I opened a notebook and wrote at the top of the page, "What am I missing?" For months, I read philosophy, cosmology, metaphysics. I listened to debates. I tried to understand what believers saw that I couldn't, but nothing resonated. Until one afternoon, I listened to a lecture on the scientific verses in the Quran. I didn't expect much. Honestly, I expected the usual cherry picking. But it wasn't that. It was the tone. The certainty without arrogance. The descriptions of embryology, of the heavens, of creation, spoken in a language that felt impossibly aligned with the world I studied for a living. I remember whispering to myself, how could a 7th century man speak like this? And that question would not leave me alone. So, I bought a Quran. Quietly. No one knew. I read it the way a scientist reads anything, with skepticism, with caution, with a highlighter. But something unexpected happened. I didn't find superstition. I found coherence. I found humility. I found this insistence on truth, on inquiry, on the idea that everything in the natural world is a sign pointing to its creator. Look, the more I read, the less alone I felt. It was like the book was reading me back. One evening, while I was studying the verse that says, God created human beings from a clot, I just sat there, stunned. That is exactly what I teach my undergraduates. The embryo forming from a clot-like adhesion of cells. How did a man in the desert know this? And the answer came to me softly, like a thought I had always known but never articulated. He didn't. God did. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just truth settling in my chest like a weight finally landing where it belongs. I reached out to a local Muslim woman I had met months earlier, and she invited me to the mosque. I walked in trembling, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me already knew what was happening. She sat beside me. She placed her hand on mine, and she asked, "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. My voice cracked. And I said the words that changed my life. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasul Allah. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. I cried in a way I had never cried in my life. Not from sadness, from relief. Life after Islam was not a perfect fairy tale. I struggled. My colleagues didn't understand. Some friends drifted away. My family asked questions I didn't always know how to answer. But I also found something I didn't know I was starving for. Silence. The kind that heals, not the kind that isolates. Prayer became my grounding, my 5 daily reminders that I am not the center of the universe. And thank God for that. I stopped feeling like I had to carry the entire weight of my life alone. I learned to surrender, to trust, to rest. And my research, strangely, it became more precious. Every cell I study feels like a verse. Every gene expression map feels like a reminder of divine artistry. I no longer see randomness. I see intention everywhere. Islam didn't make me less of a scientist. It made me a better one. Because now when I step into the lab, I know that truth is not something I invent. It is something I uncover. If you're someone searching, someone caught between skepticism and longing, someone who keeps pretending you're fine because asking deeper questions feels too risky, look at your life honestly. Ask yourself why the things you chase never fill you. Ask yourself why the universe feels too ordered to be accidental. And ask yourself why that idea scares you so much. You don't have to turn off your mind to find God. You just have to follow it honestly to the end. And if that path leads you to Islam, know this. You're not abandoning science. You are expanding it. Thank you for listening to me. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And every day, I discover a new reason to be grateful that God allowed me to see what I once thought was impossible. What science couldn't answer, Islam did.